Well, greetings and welcome to the Dividing Line. We are coming from the big studio because we've got a big guest. And I'm not going to ask what his current bench max is, but we've got a big guest on today to talk about something that should be absolutely fascinating to almost everybody in the audience, because most of our audience is made up of geeks and people who like to talk about textual criticism and weird stuff like that. We're not looking for the big audience, we're looking for the weird audience, and we definitely have the corner on that one. Anyways, coming to us from north of the border, which I'm, to be honest with you, am a little bit surprised that you still have the freedom to do this. Are you, do you use like VPN so they don't know where you are? You're actually in Ghana or something like that. Wes Huff is with us for a while today on the program. And is it cooling down yet out there?
It is, but not by much. It's been pretty mild up here in Toronto. So we've lucked out. The temperature dropped a little bit there. But I was just in New Zealand last week, 2 weeks ago, and it was quite a bit colder there than it is in Toronto. But they're heading into their summer, and we're heading into our winter. So it won't be, that temperature switch won't be there for long.
I remember traveling the world like you are right now. I'm sorry for all of the experience you have to have with TSA and the lines, and I had all the access clear and global access and had all that stuff up until the end of 2019, and then the world changed, and so I'm just in my little RV and haven't been touched by a TSA agent since 2019. It's a good feeling. It really, really is. But you're getting to do all the fun stuff out there, and I will mention when you sort of blew up the Joe Rogan program, that's when we first started to chat afterwards. I could have seen you if I'd gone with Jeff Durbin up to the Ezra Institute thing. Well, that was like, I think it was 2018 or 2019, somewhere around in that neck of the woods, but didn't get a chance to do that. And so if anyone's wondering, so why didn't you have Wes on after that? The reason, as you'll testify, was I knew you were too busy to begin with. It would happen eventually. And I was actually concerned. You've got so much stuff going on. You're a dad, and you've got little ones, and you're working on your PhD, and you're involved in the church. And I'm sitting back going, man, that's a lot. That is a lot. And everybody and their second cousin was trying to get, your diminishing amount of time at that particular point in time. So I was like, hey, just stay strong, man. We'll eventually hook up and be able to do something. And I'm not sure this is the most exciting topic necessarily to have drawn us together, but have things maybe slowed down just a little bit for you since Rogan?
No, not really. But you know what? I have a great support system, and I'm plugged in as much as I can be with my local church. So I think, God has been very gracious to me with all of the opportunities, but I'm actually not looking for any exposure. So it's really easy to say no. It's funny sometimes when you get asked to do, there's some particularly large podcasts that I've just said like, thank you, but no thank you. And you can kind of tell they're not used to people turning them down. Because they go, well, what do you mean? This is going to be great exposure for you. And I kind of think like, yeah, people are recognizing me in public now, and I don't really want that to happen any more than it already is. So like, I'll just stay and, I'll take a few opportunities here and there, but I'm under no illusion that I should be saying yes to too many things. I have, like you said, I got 4 kids. My youngest is only 3 months old. And so it's, life is full, and by God's grace, I don't need to make it any more complicated than it already is.
My youngest grandson, Kuiper, is about 3 months as well. So you're heading into teething and further sleep deprivation and all that fun stuff. So enjoy that, because they grow up so fast. It is truly astonishing, and you find yourself missing the sleepless nights. You don't during the time. I understand that. I do recall that, but you will eventually miss all that fun stuff. So you're working on you're continuing to work on your doctorate. You've got your work to be doing in that area. But what brings us, well, actually, you contacted me. And I had mentioned that I felt it would be appropriate to comment on, Knowles did a segment on his program that included you and included a man by the name of Amman Tillman, Dr. Amman Tillman. And for people who don't remember this, believe me, I actually have people in my audience that would definitely remember when we had this discussion in October of last year. I had to go back and listen to it to refresh my memory of some of this stuff. But last year at this time, while I was on the road, Jeff Durbin sent me 2 clips from Amman Tillman on the Danny Jones show. And I listened while I was driving, and had not finished listening to both clips when I did the first program somewhere in Louisiana. And then I listened to the second clip before the second program we did, and the second clip was a whole lot worse than the first one. And I think it would be worthwhile, before we start talking about this, Wes, let me just play a couple, and I only have the audio here, so we'll still be on the screen. And this will be our first test of my playing something and making sure it all works. But I said something about Amman Tillman on this program that I've never said about anybody else. It's not that I haven't addressed the demonic realm in the past. It's not a big emphasis here. But I had never before said about a living person that I believe this person is demonized. But I did in this situation. And I did because at the end of the Danny Jones show, after talking about all sorts of spiritual experiences, enough drugs to, I mean, I'll be honest with you, he talks about drugs I've never even heard of. I'm a boomer. So, I had acquaintances in high school that were potheads, but that was about as far as that went. And so he knows about drugs that I've never even heard of and don't want to find out about either. And so all this pharmakia stuff, and then once I found out what he was actually claiming about Jesus, which I don't know we're going to get into, but it's, in my opinion, the vilest stuff I've ever heard. The nastiest, most amazing evil to be uttered about Jesus is uttered by this man. But when we got to the end of the program, he said that his purpose was to free the world from the mythology of Christianity. He tied this into being the Antichrist, and to free man so that man can be the ultimate authority. And I mean, this is exactly what the Antichrist would be all about to begin with. And so this is what I said at that time.
What he expressed as his ultimate goal is the denigration of Jesus Christ and the exaltation of mankind to the ultimate position of authority. That is Antichrist. That's what the Antichrist is. He's denying that Christ has come in the flesh. Jesus is no divine person. He was an evil, vile person. And mankind is the measure of all things. That's Antichrist. He's fulfilling the prophecy. Now, I've never said this about anyone on this program, to my knowledge. And I did not look up the stuff to see if maybe I have, and I just didn't know about it. Having listened to 3.5 hours of this individual blabbering on this program and wandering all over the planet, I believe, and I'm not recommending that you watch it, I told you, it is oppressive. It is spiritually oppressive. And I believe it's spiritually oppressive because I believe Amman Hallman is demonized. I see no other explanation.
So that's what I said. And like I said, I never made that comment about anybody before. So when I see Knowles, a clip that says that you, what was the terminology that they used here? Wes Huff causes a demon to show itself. I'm like, all right, what is Wes doing now? I mean, and doing it remotely even. That's quite a trick that you pulled off here. Give us the background here. You were telling us before we got on the air, you had probably within a month of when I made my comments, you had been on a program and had been asked about the same stuff. Is that where this all started?
Yeah, so I was invited on the Julian Dory podcast. Julian is a friend of Danny's. Julian is out in New York, and so over a year ago now, last October, I believe it was. No, it was previous to that. It might have been September. I flew down to New York and I hopped on Julian's podcast, and we talked about all sorts of things. We, addressed all the typical stuff about the Bible and the Council of Nicaea and translations. And he's not a believer, but we had a fascinating and I think very productive conversation in terms of dispelling a lot of those myths about that kind of stuff. His one of his media managers is a Christian guy, and so invited me on to talk about this. And in the course of the conversation, I had made an Instagram reel which addressed a clip from the Danny Jones podcast where Amman was talking about the origin of the word Christ, and that via his expertise in classical medical texts, there's this usage of it, right? Chrio being, to anoint, being related to applying drugs to eyes, and that being actually what Christ means, and that Jesus was actually a drug pusher and all of these things. And so I just make this quick video like, no, this is the etymological fallacy. It doesn't work like that. This is applying really broad definitions to very specific things. And so that's what I talked about in the reel, and then that's what my friend Julian brought up, and then eventually Amman goes back on the Danny Jones podcast, and what you saw, which is what Michael Knowles also saw and then put out, was Danny Jones bringing up my clip on Julian Dory to Amman, and then Amman responding to it, and then Michael Knowles responding to the response of the original video. So, multiple levels, but that's what it is. It's me doing a response video and then commenting on one podcast, and then the person who's involved in the original video from the response commenting. And you can kind of see what's being alluded to by Knowles is that Amman has a very visceral response to me simply saying you should apply basic exegesis and hermeneutics when you're reading ancient texts, and Amman, writhes in discomfort at such a statement.
Yeah. Well, we'll take a look at it, but before we do that, I found it encouraging because when I listened to some of the stuff that you were saying, you focused in on the exact same stuff that we did, and we didn't have any connection about this. I mean, I was listening to it, you're listening to it, we're both going, whoa. This guy, for example, does not believe that the Hebrew of the Old Testament is the original, that the Septuagint is actually the original, and the Hebrew is a translation from the Septuagint. And I'm just like, and he's sitting there going, well, yeah, I mean, you just got to read the Septuagint, and you can it's clear. It just gives lots of evidence that it's the original. I'm like, has he ever? I immediately thought of it's weird. I started following on Twitter X a Mormon recently, just one, and now my entire feed is filled with modern Mormonism, which, believe me, is massively different than the Mormonism I started dealing with back in the 1980s. But anyways, someone posted a text from 1 Nephi chapter 11, and I saw it last night. I was at dinner with a friend, and this was actually very encouraging to me because it's been many, 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 many years since I've read about the variations and the changes in the Book of Mormon. But I remembered that this text they had quoted was changed by Joseph Smith. And it originally said the everlasting God. Now it says the Son of the everlasting God. And so I had just quickly tapped out a response. Should we be reading the 1830 or the 1837 version of this particular text? And then sent it and went back to having dinner with my friend. Someone's response, and you'll get this immediately, someone's response was, is that any different than Jeremiah 31 and Hebrews 8? And you and I both know what that is. I mean, when I preach through Hebrews, the poor people who have me as a pastor have to learn textual criticism along the way, because there is a key textual critical variant in Hebrews chapter 8. The writer of the Hebrews follows the Septuagint, and it's the difference between even though I was a husband to you, or even though I did not care for you. Now, those are two different statements. And for me, anyways, and you can comment on this if you'd like, for me, if I'm preaching through Hebrews, I did 82, 84 sermons through Hebrews, something like that. I can't let my audience, if it's my church, if it's my people, if I'm in somebody else's church, I'm not going to do this, obviously. But in my church, I don't want them looking back at Jeremiah 31 and seeing, though I was a husband to them, and then they look at Hebrews, and though I did not care for them, and I didn't cover it, because they're going to know that I knew it was there in the first place. And so you cover it, you talk about it, and that makes some people uncomfortable. I understand that, but we live in a day where that discomfort just simply has to be weighed against the necessity of knowing that this stuff exists. And so a Mormon threw that back at me in defense of the change in 1 Nephi chapter 11. And of course, my response was, are you considering that a parallel? It's the same person made the change in the Book of Mormon. But the point is that, as you know, the difference in the Hebrew is between Baal, husband to you, and Gaal, to despise. And Bet and Gimel, similar forms of letters, not identical, obviously, but similar forms of letters. But that's where the variant came from. The Septuagint is giving evidence of the fact that there was a difference in the Proto-Masoretic Hebrew texts, and that particular, the Septuagint, for people that aren't familiar with this, it wasn't just done at one time. The letter says that it was, and well, actually the letter says that the Torah, initially the Pentateuch was, but the story that Christians believed for years and years and years was that these 70 or 72 scholars go into the caves, they do the translation, come out, they're word for word the same, which would clearly have to be divine providence and inspiration, so on and so forth. And the Septuagint was the Bible of the early church. But that's not how it happened. And the translation is of varying levels of quality, depending on where you are in the Tanakh. And so there, the Septuagint is giving clear evidence of being a translation of the Hebrew. And Amman himself admits he doesn't read Hebrew and doesn't think you need to.
No, and that becomes pretty apparent when he makes some of these comments. And I mean, additionally to that, like, Amman denies Septuagintal scholarship in general. So, like, if I'm sitting there and I'm referencing Gregory Lanier or like William Ross or Timothy Matthew Law, that's irrelevant to him because he doesn't think that that's an actual field and discipline. He thinks that these are made up categories and only he's the one who's aware of what's actually going on. So he's not interested, and this is part of the issue with even having a conversation with someone like this. You can't start on even ground. If they don't know Hebrew and they're making pretty overt statements about, Hebrew being far more of a simple language and Greek is a complicated language, and that's obviously how languages go from one to the other, right? So you wouldn't translate Hebrew into Greek because Greek is so complicated. You go the other way around. Like these aren't very good arguments to begin with. But then to deny the entire field of individuals who are the people who you should be interacting with, if you want to make that thesis, if you want to say that the Septuagint was the original Hebrew Bible, I don't even know if that term would make any sense
Right.
if you think Greek is original. But if you just deny the scholarship exists or is legitimate, then that's kind of an easy trump card on your behalf because you can just, at that point, just deny, deny, deny. So that's the issue you run in with a guy like Amman.
Well, and he's obviously not even trying to function within scholarship. He's not even, he's left that field a long time ago. I was just stunned at his classicists are the only people who know anything, any New Testament scholarship, Old Testament scholarship. It's all irrelevant unless you're a classicist, and he seems to be the only one. Just that there's almost nobody else he showed almost any respect for whatsoever. So he's not trying to interact, but when he's on podcasts like that, people that are interviewing him, Danny Jones in the first interview that I listened to, just sat there going, "Wow, that's heavy." It was clear he just didn't have any idea where this guy was coming from, had no way of pushing back. It did seem he pushed back some on the second interview, but he gets away with this kind of stuff because it's just pure. Well, I don't know. He's sitting there in a short sleeve shirt and he's got Greek all over his arms. So I guess that means you automatically know what you're talking about, I suppose. But I even said in my program, I said, you could never debate a man like this. And I wanted to ask you, I almost forgotten. I'm going to play the clip here in a second, but he even says, no wonder he wouldn't face me. He said that about you. What do you know what he's referring to there?
I mean, Danny reached out to me a couple times to come in and interact with Amman. I mean, it was at the height of the craziness. Right. It was during a period of time when I was receiving debate, invitations on a weekly basis. And I'm just, arguably it's one debate with Billy Carson that kind of launched everything. But I'm not typically a debater. That's not necessarily what I do on a regular basis. And, at the time, my wife was on modified bed rest. There were complications with her pregnancy, and there was so much going on that I said, like, hey, Danny, maybe one day down the road, I might come on your podcast, but like this is not the time. So Amman takes those kinds of responses as these people are running scared of me. He doesn't factor in that, maybe other people have lives and that those also factor into the grand scheme of things. But even just looking at a little bit of what, Amman, his own programs on his YouTube channel, Lady Babylon 666, and kind of the antics that he goes through on a regular basis, and some of the stuff that he's published, it's just, I don't think there's room for interaction. And he thinks that everybody's running scared of him because he's such a genius. I think the hard pill to swallow for guys like Danny Jones, which I think he will wake up to one day, is that the reason people keep turning down an invitation to interact with Amman is because Amman's simply not worth their time. He the way he conducts himself is just not something that people are going to be open to interact with. And that's going to be a deterrent. That's good. That's a deterrent for me because I don't have the time of day to commit to something like that. And he's referencing classical texts here and there, and he's changing the subject, and he's all over the place. He's not a linear thinker, and you can't interact logically with someone who does not have a linear thought pattern, who thinks they're a genius, who thinks they're the only one who can interpret Greek, who, I think it was when Dan McClellan was on Danny Jones, he mentioned BDAG, the lexicon. And a little bit later on, Amman reviewed that and said, that's just for Christian texts. That doesn't matter. They're not real anyways. They would just reinterpret everything they want. So, right, he won't recognize a lexicon. So what am I supposed to do if he's going to, deny that the lexicon I'm using is even a lexicon worth using? So
Right. Yeah, and that's what I'd said. And by the way, they reached out to me too. And I was like, That's a long drive. That's a really, really long drive. What do you mean long drive? Well, that's how I travel now. And then someone within the past 2 months, Rich forwarded me an email, and I don't remember who it was, but it was in the last 2 months, was saying someone really needs to debate this man. And I didn't respond to the email, but I did in my mind, which when you get old is half the battle, okay? You know, and in fact, once you get old, you go, did I write that or did I just think that? I can't remember now. But my thought response was the amount of time you would have to invest to deal with the wide and often disconnected sources that this man throws together would be astonishing. I mean, you would literally have to dedicate yourself to that for a very lengthy period of time. And you've got your PhD work. I have a project that I really am becoming very convicted about. It's been 11 years since I wrote a book now. And there's a subject that would be really, really helpful, and it's right down my alley. I need to get it done. So I'm sitting here going, is that even worth it? And then the same thing you saw. I cannot see him doing a 20-minute opening statement that anyone would be able to understand. I can't see how he can organize thoughts, because in 3.5 hours on Danny Jones, I don't know that he went more than 90 seconds on any one topic before he was off on some other topic that was not even remotely connected to it. So I think most people would just be sitting there going, what was that all about? I don't get any of that. We came to the same conclusions on that. But yes, the number of people who would say everyone's running scared from me. Does the name Gail Ripplinger mean anything to you?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have her book up on my shelf right there. I have a KJV only allotted section on the top of my bookshelf. And yes, I do have a very marked up for research purposes copy of Gail Ripplinger's New Age Bible versions.
Did you ever hear the one time she exposed herself to having somebody oppose her?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so as you know, that was me. And that's where we learned about acrostic algebra, that the Lord calls the New American Standard Bible the NASV, not the NASB, and stuff like that. In some ways, honestly, Gail would be a little bit easier to deal with than Amman. Despite how way out in the woods she is, I think it would actually be a little bit easier to deal with her than with Amman Hallman. So with that said, I think everybody needs to know what we're talking about now. By the way, have you talked to Danny about this at all? Because I'm trying to figure out the candles.
It's dramatic effect.
Is that all it was?
Yeah. He's playing up that he knows that Amman thinks of himself as this kind of satanic, mystic kind of guy. It's drama.
Well, okay, I'm trying to. Did you see the napkin type things next to him and stuff? I mean, the whole thing looked like it was just. I wasn't sure what in the world was going on there, but it is interesting, and you can see at the beginning here. I'm not sure if can you see the opening here, Wes? That your freeze frame. There's his arm there, Cosmocrator. Right is visible there. And we were talking about that before the program started. And that's found in the New Testament, worldly powers, plural, but that's one worldly ruler, basically, right on his forearm there. So he's got some really interesting stuff there. Like I said, a freeze frame of his arms would provide some interesting translational work, I would imagine. But so as I said, the only way I could come up with this was to play Noel's stuff, so he'll pop up once in a while. I hope he doesn't mind. Because of the fact that it's a family-oriented show, and I don't have all the technical stuff to go bleep, 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 bleep that he has. So let's watch Wes Huff cause a demon to come out of this fellow. Actually, he's just, I think, demonstrating that, again, a debate would never, ever work. So let's see what's going on here.
Here we go. Eternal throne as the second person of the Trinity stepping into humanity. But if you were to say to someone after this, if someone said like, hey, you met Wes Huff, how was he? And you went, he's a little bit condescending. You wouldn't be talking about my humility.
No.
Right? Because that word has a different meaning in its different context. And part of the problem with something like what Amman says is that he's taking terminology that exists within the parameters of a specific field, and then he's applying them in areas where there's an entirely different contextual meaning and spectrum of understanding.
Let me just freeze this just for a moment. Wes, one of the most useful books that my Greek professor had me read in third year was Moises Silva's Biblical Words and Their Meanings, Lexical Semantics. And I mean, that was, I'm so old, that was a fairly new book at that time. That gives you an idea. But that understanding of semantic range in lexicography and the meaning of words, I don't get the feeling that Amman has a clue what that's all about, doesn't care about that. But let's be honest, I think one of the weakest areas of evangelical preaching and teaching when the language is brought up is recognizing how context is king, even in determining the meaning of words as they're being used in the New Testament or in early Christian literature, anything like that at all. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, totally. I mean, this is the example to give context to what people are listening to is I'm explaining to Julian Dory, who's asking me about this, and I'm using an example of saying, okay, like words mean what they mean within their context. So in a theological conversation, condescension, the condescension of Christ means the coming down, right? It has this kind of connotation of both his incarnation, but in aspects of humility. And so then I say like, but if I was talking to you and you said, oh, well, Wes was really condescending, right? That has a completely different meaning within just common parlance. And so I'm saying like words mean what they mean when we use them properly. And so that's not going to work if you're going to take one word and then apply it just broadly over everything, right? You don't paint the Sistine Chapel with a roller. That's not going to work. It's not going to get you, Michelangelo's intricacy on the roof of the chapel. So, but that's what Amman largely does, and he wants to take a word like Christ and he wants to apply it, in this one usage that he's found where it has to do with drug application to a particular eye issue, and then say, well, now that means that all of the time, every time I see it, including Christian literature. Now, forget the fact that, you have in John them saying, that Jesus is the Christ, which means the Messiah. Forget verses like that. That doesn't mean anything to us. We're going to broadly apply all of these terms. And so that's what I'm explaining to Julian, which is being played by Danny to Amman. So the context is actually that, exactly what you're saying. In terms of semantic range, there is a semantic range, but we don't just do the kind of amplified Bible thing and say, well, here are all the ways that this word could be used, and that's okay, that's great, but what way is it used in this particular sentence? Because that matters, and the way you get there is by reading the actual context of what's on the page in front of you. That's what I'm explaining. So very much related to what you're saying in terms of when we're trying to understand these things, like basic learning of not just Greek or Hebrew, but any language, semantics and the semantic range and like contextual application, those are all going to be key so that you're aware of what's going. It's kind of, I don't know, if you watch like movies and stuff and there's an archaeologist and they're in some like tomb and there's some inscription on the wall and the archaeologist goes up to it and they're like sight translating and like, it says, we need to open the door on the left. In reality, if someone who's actually involved in ancient languages, they'll be like, it says we need to open the door, or the sky or the ocean or because depending, if you only have one line, you kind of have to use the semantic range, which always makes me laugh when you're watching the kind of Indiana Jones-esque shows and they know exactly what it says, and that's how they can open the crypt. It never works that well.
No,
only given a limited amount.
Except you and I both know that if they actually translated it correctly, it would slow the movie down so much it would be 7 hours and 47 minutes long, and would never make it to the theater. So we'll have further reason to mention this, because when Amman starts responding to you, he throws out a New Testament reference against you, which illustrates exactly what we just said. But I think people in the audience need to understand, because this is a place where people who aren't involved in apologetics or doing New Testament stuff struggle. Wes just mentioned allowing the New Testament to define the parameters for defining, for example, Messiah. You got to understand something. In a lot of scholarship, there is no New Testament context. They believe the New Testament to be contradictory to itself. It isn't consistent with itself. And so there is a lot of scholarship that will go, no, you can look at how John uses a term in the gospel, but you can't then go look at Revelation, because we're not sure John wrote that, and it may have been totally different context, and so we can't let those two things come together. And most people who are in good, solid churches, that's what their preachers are doing all the time. And so they just automatically assume that's what everybody does, but that's not the case. And that's something that I think brings confusion to folks, and it's helpful to explain it. But we'll see that in just a moment. So let's go back to, this is sort of weird. This is you on a different webcast, on a second webcast, on a third webcast, now on the fourth webcast. I mean, Spurgeon never had to worry about any of this stuff. It's just pretty straightforward back then.
So part of what he said that some people jumped on was that he says that the word Christ comes from the Greek word chrio, which it does, right? To anoint. And in ancient Greek medical texts, there is a usage of that, which he has capitalized on with applying drugs to your eyes. Now, more broadly, chrio does mean to rub, particularly a liquid ointment or substance, on your body. There's two sort of terms that are used specifically within biblical studies, but this applies to anything within the ancient world where we're trying to come up with translations in deriving meaning. The first is there's a discipline called hermeneutics, and hermeneutics is this interpretation.
It's so funny about hermeneutics.
Methodology of interpretation that we use on a particular text. Before hermeneutics is exegesis, and exegesis is a Greek word that literally means to bring out. Right, the opposite would be eisegesis, to read into. So when you're exegeting something and you're looking at an ancient language.
Okay, now this is where, Knowles, you can see the look on his face here, and everybody is like, this is not how most rational people respond to anybody saying anything. I mean, you're not saying anything weird. I mean, let's be honest, for a lot of folks who've never done languages, for a monolingual person it's never even given consideration, yeah, okay, exegesis, hermeneutics, eisegesis, okay, there's some technical terminology here, but you're explaining what it means. But he looks like he's in pain. I mean, he's grabbing his like he's got a headache, and he's rocking back and forth. This is, I think, what a lot of people are sort of like, this is weird. When you first saw it, what was your reaction to his physical manifestation?
I mean, unfortunately, I had seen from his own YouTube program that he does, this is kind of par for the course for him.
Okay.
He does this kind of rocking, moving around. He doesn't really stay in one place. And I mean, I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's a physical thing. I don't know if it's, induced by chemical substances that he may or may not have taken. But this is kind of how he acts on a regular basis. He is not, I wouldn't describe him as stationary.
Well, yeah, I saw that in the original Danny Jones when I saw the clips of that. Yeah, he's moving around. He's not stationary. But it's almost like you are causing him pain because you're not agreeing with him. That was the first thing I saw was when you hear someone saying something, you're either going to have to respond to, it disagrees with your thesis, something like that. For me, when I hear that, I get more focused because I'm thinking about how to best respond to what that person's saying. He's doing just the opposite. It's like, I don't want to hear any more of this. Shut it off. This hurts, this kind of stuff. It's just, there's not anything rational going on here at all. And I think a lot of people just catch that. It doesn't make him wrong, but what it does make a lot of us go, there's something beyond just the discussion of hermeneutics. And I was, in a second here, Danny Jones is going to say, what he's going to say, you don't believe in hermeneutics or something along like that. And like I said earlier, I don't think he knew what hermeneutics was before the first time. So I think he has been listening, and that's an encouraging thing to me, anyways, that someone might be catching any of that. But all right, he's going to get even. And folks, when you hear it blink out, that's because it's been edited for family-friendly viewing.
You're trying to get at the author's intention by different levels of contextual application.
He's pulling the demon out of you.
Stop.
You're trying to stop. I can't take it.
You look like you're going through an exorcism right now.
Steve,
Is
stop.
Wes Huff pulling the devil out of you right now?
God.
He's
God,
confusing
stop.
and
It's so
Haven't you
bad.
ever heard of hermeneutics?
It's
realms of how we do.
Stop. You're trying to get to the intention of the author. No, you're not.
Okay, so you're not trying to get to the intention of the author. Okay, stop. And Danny goes, what's wrong with hermeneutics? It's just real basic question. How do you respond to someone who says, hey, the intention of the author doesn't matter?
I mean, you can't. Not really. It's not a proactive conversation at that point. And that's what I mean. Like, you can only go so far in these types of conversations if you're not starting on any type of agreed upon ground. If we can't agree that the language is even saying what the language is saying, then, I mean, where's the connective tissue? I don't know. So, and this is what everybody, because I know, like, you've been approached, I've been approached. I know probably about 5 other people who are in kind of this space, who study biblical languages or teach New Testament or Old Testament or that kind of thing, that have been reached out to interact with Amman, and everybody is taking even just a cursory glance at this kind of stuff and said, that's not worth my time. I'm not going to travel to take time out of my schedule where I'm, fill in the blank, teaching, marking, spending time with my family. It's just not in the list of productive things. This is not up there.
30 years ago, no one probably would have ever heard of this fellow. I'm so thankful. This Sunday night at church, this fellow came up to me after the service, and he gave me this real nice gift bag. And he was visiting from Madrid, Spain. And their church there has been deeply influenced and encouraged by Apologia Church and by Alpha and Omega Ministries. And I thought at the time, what a day we live in. I mean, just think of the audience you've been able to reach in your young life. That generations before you never would have even thought of being able to have any influence on people literally across the world. And yet that's what the internet has brought to us. But it's also brought this to us. The reason that he has an audience, the reason he has a YouTube channel, the reason that there's people interested in this kind of stuff is there's a lot of people who want a reason to disbelieve. And this is the kind of stuff that people put out there. So, when the printing press was invented, it was called the tool of Satan and everything else. And there wouldn't have been a Reformation without the printing press. But at the same time, there's been lots of stuff produced on a printing press that, is extremely negative. So we have to live in the world that the Lord has called us to live in. But it is it is interesting that I just don't think that a lot of this stuff would ever get anywhere. It would be in a little cult, in a little town someplace, wherever he lives. I'm not sure where it is, but it wouldn't be getting global views. And the trick for us, and the trick is going to be more for you. I'm the old guy that on my way out. You're the next. Actually, you're sort of a generation beyond that. The second generation. You're young enough to be got a lot of time in front of you. You're going to have challenges that I can't even begin to imagine. AI, how you're going to interact with that kind of stuff. The idolatry, I think, that will eventually start, and I'm already seeing coming from people, that kind of stuff. It's just huge challenges. And is AI useful? Obviously. Can AI be made dangerous? Obviously. Do I have answers as to how to, when people ask, how should ministers be using these tools in their preparation? That's not something, we didn't have a class on that when I was in seminary. And I'm not sure if there are any classes on it now, to be honest with you. The church is normally behind the curve on that kind of stuff. But still, you're going to have some super challenges. And whether you like it or not, because of the opportunities already been given to you, there are going to be people asking you those questions. You may sit back and go, could you give me a break and let me have some more experience before I even try to tackle some of that stuff? But it's going to be coming your direction. It really, really, really is. And watching this kind of stuff, I imagine all you can see right now is Amman. Sorry about that. I can see you just fine, and everybody else can see me talking to you. But
I can see you. Yeah.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
So he can see this one here, Rich?
Rich is doing a pretty good job of switching them back and forth, so I'm not.
Okay. All right. Well, let's finish up this clip so everybody knows everything we were talking about.
You're reading an ancient language.
Amman, you're pulling out a specific context in Galen's medical text and trying to apply it to everything across the board, which is intellectually dishonest.
Here's the problem. I'm not pulling it out of Galen. Does Galen have it? Yes. Euripides has it. He gets a sex drug that is a Christ. One of the characters asks, is it a Christ? This is not from the medical. This is from everything. Everything, Wes Huff, you fake. Well, it's what the devil gives you, man. It's what the devil gives you. Look.
Okay, no, wait a minute. Okay, it's what the devil gives you. It's what the devil gives you, man. So Danny Jones has just said the right thing. I mean, that was a very, very good refutation. You're taking one thing, and it's intellectually dishonest. He's exactly right. Bing, bing, bing. Give the man a donut. And his response is, the devil gives you everything? Can you see something there I can't see? Or is this just incoherent?
I mean, it's once again, like, this is kind of a normal conversation, at least from what I've seen with Amman. Like, it's bouncing around. He doesn't really stay on topic for very long, and then he throws statements like that out. I don't know where they come from, but yeah, it's odd. It's odd to say the least.
You have a gift of understatement at that point. I think most people sitting there looking at him going, the devil gives you everything, is going to go, yeah, I think that's not an answer to what he just said, and maybe it came from someplace you don't want to tell us about.
He's been pumped up in his pride. He thinks he's something now because he slaughtered somebody who was making stuff up. Well, guess what? This is the gymnasium of the cosmos, baby. Right? You'll be taken down. You'll be taken down by somebody who knows.
Well, I'm really...
Okay, so the gymnasium of the cosmos, Wes, are you... Now, I know you work out, but do you work out cosmically?
Not that I'm aware of, but maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a threat. I think there in some sense he's gonna take you down. But when you first heard that, did you chuckled there? Did you just chuckle when you heard that, or what?
Yeah. You just got to. There's no. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily something. I'll give Danny Jones credit. Danny invests a lot into his podcast. I think he's a serious individual in terms of building his own brand and making it engaging for people. But I honestly I don't think people like Amman are worth the time of day. I have a friend who likes to say sometimes there's a necessity to take out the trash. And I think that's true. I mean, every once in a while, you have to deal with people who are just saying things and they have a large audience and they're influencing people negatively. But I think a fair-minded person is going to look at Amman and they're going to go, I don't know about this. Like, this doesn't make any sense. It's not linear. It's not logical. And they're going to dismiss it. We can't account for everybody who is following him. But this isn't just people like you and I, James. Like, this is people across the board in terms of skeptics, atheists, liberals who have come out and said, like, this guy's out to lunch. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Oh yeah.
So it's Amman against the world. It really, really is. If he's denying that New Testament scholarship, Septuagintal scholarship are even valid disciplines, then what are you going to do with that? There are more proactive people to engage with who are misleading people. Now, the reason I did the Billy Carson conversation originally was because dozens and dozens of people were sending me Billy Carson clips.
Right.
And so there was a necessity there, right?
Right.
Sometimes you just need to deal with the silliness. But I think Amman is on a kind of a next level of that.
Yeah, he's definitely on a next level. And anybody who called that conversation you had with Billy a debate doesn't know what a debate is, obviously, clearly. That was, I mean, how long did he last before he left?
I mean, to give him the benefit of the doubt, he said he had about an hour, and I think he stayed for about an hour and 15 minutes.
Okay, all right.
But I think he probably wanted to leave a lot earlier than that in the course of the conversation. Testament to his reaction afterwards.
Oh yeah. That was pretty amazing. I can only liken it. Did you ever see my debate with Father Peter Stravinskas on purgatory? 2001.
I did watch those debates, the great debate series,
Yes.
right back in the day.
Yeah,
I did. I don't know if I can remember exactly the one with Peter Stravinskas, but I know
he was the one. He was the one who, during the audience questions, somebody said, "So can I just give money to get out of purgatory?" And he said, "Pay me now or pay me later." Yeah. And the cross-examination with him on 1 Corinthians chapter 3 is the first thing that comes up in Google when you search on his name, and he's still very angry about that to this day. But that was someone who wanted out of there an hour and a half before he was actually able to get out of there. And I think that was the same thing you had that in that situation. But yeah, someone as popular as that, yeah, sometimes you have to deal with things you don't want to really have to deal with, or we can correct things, give us this opportunity of talking about the textual history. I don't know if you know, but we did do a Apologia Radio thing on the Isaiah scroll and some of the variants that were thrown at you afterwards, just simply because there was so much stuff being thrown out. I don't know how you got any sleep during that period of time and everything else too. So yeah, but that gave us opportunity to talk about a lot of positive things. So you try to make things work out that way. But no, I do think that people like this get away with what they get away with because the church in general is afraid to talk about a lot of historical issues in regards to the origins, compilation, and translation of the Bible. In my experience for many decades now, I taught textual criticism in Kyiv, Ukraine, a number of years ago. And I had an older pastor come up to me after the class And he said, you know, I thank you very, very much. I understand what you said. It encourages my faith. He says, but you need to understand something. I could never present this to my people. I could never present it to my people. They don't have the background at all. And I think a lot of folks, even in the United States, and I understand his situation he's in. Have you done much over in Russia at all?
No, nothing. I do actually have a friend, Timothy Mitchell, who is out there teaching at a seminary, and he actually has a PhD from Birmingham in textual criticism. And so, if there is somebody in at that end of the world, there is actually an individual with a PhD in the area who is currently teaching at a seminary.
Well, yeah,
there. But
I'm sure
Eastern
there
Europe
are. But the reason I asked is, and this astonished me. I've only taught in Russia once, a place called Samara. It was in January. It's 28 degrees below zero. You're from Toronto, so you probably go, no big deal. From somebody from Arizona, 28 degrees below zero is like being in Star Wars and that the Empire Strikes Back. What was that? Hoth? Was that what it was called? Something like that. Anyway, and look, I saw those movies in the theaters, dude. When they first came out. So you gotta respect your elders. Anyways. When I was teaching in Samara, I was trying to show the students evidence that the New Testament writers identified Jesus as Yahweh. Did you know that in the Russian Synodal Bible, which is almost the only translation they have, they do not in any way indicate the presence of the Tetragrammaton in the translation? There's nothing there. They cannot see any reference to the Tetragrammaton in the Old Testament at all. So I'm sitting here looking at these texts, and they're all looking at me like I just landed from another planet, until my translator, Nick, who's just a brilliant guy, explained to me there's nothing in the Russian Bible that indicates this kind of stuff. And so there are times when the context, you aren't aware of the fact that, man, it could really be tough for people to follow some of the arguments that we just sort of assume everybody would be able to know. That was just an illustration from overseas that really, really struck me. But anyways, look, we're out of time. You have little children, and you have dinner, and you have a wife, and I appreciate your wanting to get to do all those things and help the little lady with the kids, and she's appreciative of that. We're appreciative of your taking this time. Was there anything, when you saw that I was going to talk about this, was there anything you wanted to add real quickly that you haven't gotten to yet?
No, not necessarily. If I can encourage you in that, I think the tides are turning in terms of church awareness of things like text criticism. I'm more and more encouraged by the fact that I'm getting more and more invites from churches and Christian groups who are hungry for this stuff. They really want to dig into it, and they want me to talk on things like, where did the canon come from, and what do we do with textual variants, and how do we interact with the original languages. So I think we're entering into an age where there's this proliferation of information, and I think people are realizing, okay, well, I don't always know what a reliable source is, but I want to find the answers to these questions. I don't want to farm it out to Wikipedia or something like that, which and in an age of growing skepticism, right? The authorities and the people who for a long time were just assumed to be the people that had the answers. That's not necessarily the case anymore. We can't necessarily trust everybody who claims to be an authority governmentally or in this field or that field. So I think I'm more and more encouraged as time goes on, whether it's guys like Joe Rogan or Andrew Schultz, secular comedians who are asking me questions about. I talked about the Septuagint and the Reformation on Andrew Schultz's Flagrant podcast, which is a popular secular podcast. Who would have thought that kind of thing? George Carlin was not calling F.F. Bruce to come, and these were not things that were happening. So we
doing a little ancient history there, huh? Wes? Going back to my days.
So like we do, I'm encouraged by the things that are happening. And if I can do a shameless plug, because you mentioned the whole trickiness of technology and AI, the organization I'm the vice president for, Apologetics Canada, in November, we're actually doing a conference on the theology of technology here in Ontario. So if people are interested in getting, some of those areas, and how do we interact with this stuff? I'm doing a little kind of presentation on how Christians have dealt with developments in technology over the last 2,000 years, and talking about the development of the codex and the printing press and the radio and all of those things. And so if people are, in the northern United States, or in my neck of the woods in Canada, Ontario and Quebec, we're running that conference November 8th, I believe it is. It's a Saturday, Theology of Technology, because we want to tackle some of these issues that, are
Important stuff.
relevant. Yeah. And
Important stuff.
actually, next year's conference of that one is on history, and we're having John Mead and Peter Gurry out.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to bring them up, and we're going to talk about some more Bible issues, because that's...
Do some CBGM.
Yeah, that's right.
Ask Peter about our CBGM Mexican lunches. And in
Awesome.
fact, over your right shoulder is a nice little P-52, obviously. And up there above, though, I'm trying to... I can't necessarily identify... Well, it looks like P-45 right above... Oh, no. It's P6... No, P-46.
So,
right? Is that Paul?
So that's... Yep, that's P-46, and then above that is P-1, right here.
All right, okay. Yeah.
As part of my doctoral research, I had a very fun opportunity to go to the University of Pennsylvania and work with the actual manuscript. So I sat beside P1, and I had my own piece of papyri, which I brought back with me from Egypt, and I sketched out on the papyri next to the original autograph, not proper term used, and then I copied transcribed the text on both sides, and I cut it out with a what do you use in medical stuff? What's that called? It's a scalpel. So I created my own facsimile beside the real McCoy, and that's become a little bit of a hobby for me in terms of working with some of these texts. The
only one I've held, it was down at Macquarie State University, which interestingly enough is divided between Macquarie State and someplace in Italy. They can't they can't agree to put the poor thing back together again at one place. And then I did get to, have you ever sat in the reading room at Trinity in Ireland, the Trinity, that incredible Trinity reading room with the text that forced Erasmus to insert the Comma Johanneum into his third edition?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, got to pull that out and see it and read it and do stuff like that. But you're getting to do a whole lot more stuff like that than I ever did. So
I do have
yes.
1522.
Yep.
Of Erasmus's, and I believe the Comma Johanneum, I've marked it out in here because this is the first one that had it, and
right.
I did a paper on it once, and I remember, right there as a sticky note, and there.
But what's interesting is that is not the same reading that's found in that manuscript that forced him to insert it. That's one of the interesting things about it. He ended up taking it from the more popular version of it, and the annotations on that text. If you have Erasmus's annotations, explodes with his whole discussion why he does not feel that it's original. But no one reads Erasmus's annotations anymore, so at least not King James only guys. But anyway. All right, hey, it's time for dinner. It's time for the kids. Thank you, Wes, for taking the time to be with us. It's been a blast. All the geeks in the audience are just about to explode, so we need to, help them to calm down now and stuff like that. So enjoy your P-52, your kids, and we'll talk with you again in the future.
That's great. It's been a pleasure.
All right.
Thanks.
God bless, Wes. Thank you. All right. Excellent. If there's some way to chat and let him know, we're going to close up shop here. Actually, we went over time anyways. So, hey, thanks for watching the program today, guys. We will see you next time on The Dividing Line, and it won't be quite as interesting a subject, but you never know. We'll see you next time. God bless.